I will now call upon the Chief Prosecutor for the United Kingdom of Great Britain.
That these defendants participated in and are morally guilty of crimes so frightful that the imagination staggers and reels back at their very contemplation is not in doubt. In their graves, crying out not for vengeance, but that this shall not happen again, 10 million who might be living in peace and happiness at this hour. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, and civilians killed in battles that ought never to have been. Nor was that the only or the greatest crime. 2/3 of the Jews in Europe exterminated, more than 6 million of them on the killer's own figures. Not in battle, not in passion, but in the cold, calculated, deliberate attempt to destroy nations and races, to disintegrate the traditions, the institutions, and the very existence of free and ancient states. For such crimes, these men might well have been proceeded against by summary executive action, and had the treatment which they had been parties to meting out to so many millions of innocent people been meted out to them, they could hardly have complained. But this tribunal is to adjudge their guilt not on any moral or ethical basis alone, but according to law. Let them now, accused murderers as they are, attempt to belittle the power and influence they exercised how they will. We have only to recall their ranting as they strutted across the stage of Europe dressed in their brief authority to see the part they played. They did not then tell the German people or the world that they were merely the ignorant, powerless puppets of their Führer. The defendant Speer has said, even in a totalitarian system, there must be total responsibility. It is impossible, after the catastrophe, to evade this total responsibility. If the war had been won, the leaders would also have assumed total responsibility. Almost immediately after the war had started, the organized extermination of the Jewish race began. Hirst describes the improvements that he made at Auschwitz. He introduced the new gas, Zyklon B, which took from 3 to 15 minutes to kill the people in the death chamber, dependent on climatic conditions. We knew the people were dead because their screaming stopped. Let the engineer Graeber speak of the massacre at Dubno. On the 5th of October 1942, my foreman told me that Jews from Dubno had been shot in 3 large pits, each about 30 meters long and 3 meters deep. About 1,500 persons had been killed daily. All of the 5,000 Jews who had been living in Dubno before the pogrom were to be liquidated. I drove to the site and went directly to the pits. The people who had got off the trucks, men, women, and children of all ages, had to undress upon the orders of an SS man who carried a riding or dog whip. They had to put down their clothes in fixed places, sorted according to shoes, top clothing, and underclothing. I saw a heap of shoes of about 800 to 1,000 pairs, great piles of underlinen and clothing. Without screaming or weeping, these people undressed, stood around in family groups, kissed each other, said farewells, and waited for a sign from another SS man who stood near the pit, also with a whip in his hand. During the 15 minutes that I stood near, I heard no complaint or plea for mercy. I watched a family of about 8 persons, a man and a woman both about 50, with their children of about 1, 8, and 10, and 2 grown-up daughters of about 20 to 24. An old woman with snow-white hair was holding the 1-year-old child in her arms and singing to it and tickling it. The child was cooing with delight. The couple were looking on with tears in their eyes. The father was holding the hand of a boy about 10 years old and speaking to him softly. The boy was fighting his tears. The father pointed to the sky, stroked his head, and seemed to explain something to him. At that moment, the SS man at the pit shouted something to his comrade. The latter counted off about 20 persons and instructed them to go behind the earth mound. Among them was the family which I have mentioned. I well remember a girl, slim and with black hair, who, as she passed close to me, pointed to herself and said, 23.